So, Andreas Russo here, and in this video we're going to talk about HMO and planning permission. Now, this is part of this video is being made to let you know also about a book that we're going to release very shortly. So it's been taken as part of a chapter in that book. So, but basically, what you've got so far up until 2010. There was not even any legal classification in planning of any HMO that was up to 6 people. So there wasn't any planning distinction. So it was impossible to enforce anything by planning law. I bought, I bought 2 houses during that period, and it was beautiful. And I still think it's beautiful today anyway. So in I think it was 2010, 2011, I can't remember, I think it was 2010, before the last Labour government left, they introduced a new class, C4. I hated it, absolutely hated it, because I could see what it was meant to do. Basically to restrict the change of use between a single family home and an HMO. That was it was meant to do. And at the time, as a story about myself, I just bought the house in Nottingham, which we still own. I still own, and that came to force almost exactly at that time when I bought it. But it wasn't a problem because the changes in legislation gives you plenty of time. Now, so to this day, it's changed from C3 to C4 is a permitted development. So you can do it without any planning permission. So for 5 to 6 bedroom HMO, whenever you make that change, you have an uplift, not only rental income, but obviously because of the rental income, you've got uplift in value. It is very important to note that there's been a number of one main court ruling, High Court ruling, that said unequivocally any C4 is the same from a planning point of view, not all planning point of view, but it's still classed as a dwelling house. So dwelling house is a C4, dwelling house is a C3. Up until 3 to 4 years ago, that had a significant importance, because then it meant that you could use the 4-year rule to legalize the C4 use. So, which is something that we used. I wouldn't say successfully, but quite close to successful in one of my properties. Now, also sui generis is considered a dwelling house by this High Court ruling, so much so that when it comes to council tax, you've got the same council tax banning for an HMO as it is for C3. The council, certain councils tried to put HMO council tax on each room in HMOs. It did fall flat on its face, thank goodness, because it put loads of uncertainty in the marketplace. And then the government promised to put a special ban on HMOs, which is higher in terms of tax. They haven't done it yet. If they do it, they don't do it. I couldn't care less, because I think it's still going to be valuable anyway to make that conversion. So it's only going to scare the sort of things the amateurs. Now, but they're all dwelling house. This is quite important because it could be useful at a certain point. Now, how do councils stop the change of use from C3 to C4? But is by introducing an Article 4 direction. Up until a certain point, I think especially at the beginning, councils could obtain the Article 4, they could actually issue it as a blank policy all throughout their borough without any issue. But I think it was only lately that the government said no more of this nonsense. You cannot do this. You have to really justify. If you want to do that, you really need to justify how, and the burden of proof is a bit high. So councils stopped doing it. In fact, for example, in Hull, In Hull, for example, they only have this Article 4 in certain streets. So in Hull, you can still do in most of Hull, but not in certain streets. Right enough, close to the university, you've got Article 4 close to the university. But in most places in Hull, you can do it, and I think you can do it for the foreseeable future. Whereas in Nottingham, basically, I had the house in Nottingham when this nonsense started at the beginning, and immediately, the first thing in Nottingham done is introduce the Article 4, and I think it was valid in 2012 already. They issued it in 2011. As soon as they could do it, they issued it immediately, and it was enforced in 2012. So immediately I applied for the HMO license as soon as I knew that. So no problem since then. I had this house in Nottingham running without any problem with the license and whatnot, but never had any enforcement action or anything of the sort. But obviously I've got planning permission, because then one has to regularize things, especially if you need a mortgage on it. So then Lincoln has done the same thing. I think in 2015 you could still do it, but now it's getting harder and harder for councils to try and implement this nonsense. The excuses or reasons, I call them excuses, is loss of housing, a loss of housing stock, and antisocial behavior, and other nonsense as well. These are the alleged reasons, but these are excuses for councils to implement it. The truth is that if they've got control, they've got extra revenue. This is the real proof. For example, because what happens when you get this sort of nonsense, I call it nonsense because it's not fair on people, not people like me. I welcome it. Bring as many Article 4s that you want, because I'm going to move the money where there's no Article 4 or where I can do it legally anyway. So the money does not care, the capital doesn't care. The people that are really going to suffer is the normal population. Because what happened in Nottingham, because of my HMO, I felt it first in Nottingham, then in Lincoln. Usually this has got a knock-on effect 3 to 4 years after. 4 to 5 years after, the rents in Nottingham skyrocketed. And then in Lincoln, the same thing, skyrocketed. I mean, it went absolute crazy, and it's still crazy in my opinion, the rents of rooms in Nottingham and Lincoln. And it's just because of that. But that does not mean there hasn't been development of HMOs. There's been developments, but done by big developers. It hasn't been done by small time landlords, but by big money, because then they've got the assurance there's not going to be competition, so they don't care. Actually, it's a good, safe investment for them. And also the council makes money, whether they've got backhanders and whatnot. It's very, very likely. Say, for example, in Nottingham, there's been a period of so high demand. I think it was in 2021, 2022 possibly. I put a room online and I got 40 inquiries for a room immediately in one day, whereas before I would get very, very few inquiries. Then nowadays I put a room online, I get very few inquiries. Why? Because a big building has been built close to one of that particular house, is a huge HMO, big development. So it still happens, but it's the big guys that can still do it, and the council makes money out of that. The same things applies in Lincoln anyway. So the conversion, the development is going to be there, but it's going to be done by the big money. So this is why this sort of things happen, is the poor people that unfortunately suffer, and the big guys that make the big bucks. This is what normally happens. This is why they want the control. Not because of loss of housing, not because of antisocial behavior. It's a complete nonsense situation. So the main effect of an Article 4 is the loss of affordable accommodation. This is what it is. You just restrict demand. You don't actually decrease antisocial behavior. Because say, for example, in the areas I've seen, the antisocial behavior doesn't happen from HMOs, happens from people won't benefit living in single family homes. So big developers make the big bucks when the Article 4 is in place. And then from your point of view, if you develop HMOs, if you've got HMOs, you also welcome it because your investment is very safe. There's going to be a restriction on the amount of HMOs that are going to be around, so your investment is going to be much, much safer. Banks love it as well. Banks absolutely love it because banks, what they want is a very tight planning law and planning system where the supply is restricted and there's not going to be huge developments, so that their investments are safe. So everything goes hand in hand. This is the reality, the way I see it, but is corroborated by the real thing. What you see, you can see it yourself in using your eyes. Whereas if there's no Article 4, usually prices are much lower and it's easier for people to find accommodation. So buy where the Article 4 is not in place. Should that happen in your area, don't be scared, just move. Also, as soon as you've got you know about the Article 4, you can still buy a house or a number of houses. All you have to do is apply for HMO license, for the HMO license pretty much immediately as you buy it, and seek a certificate of lawful use. I think it's called something else because basically the council, the planning department, when there's a permitted development right that you can use, they can give you the certificate where you declare that you're using it for that particular lawful use, and even there are very little burden of proof that you require, and they're going to give you it. I think it's cost £200 odd, and it's very, very much worth it. So you don't necessarily need to wait until they bring in the Article 4 enforced, and then you do it after, because then the burden of proof is a bit higher. If you do it before, it's slightly more advantageous, and then you're going to need it anyway, because if you've got an Article 4, then the bank will want to see that you can use it as an HMO from a planning point of view. So as soon as it happens, just move area, because still in England and Wales, there's many places where there's not any Article 4 area, and I think there's going to still be places in England and Wales where the Article 4 is not in place. The way I do it usually is, I used to do it because at the moment I'm focusing in the northeast Lincolnshire area in terms of investment. The way I used to do it is I looked at the cheapest possible big houses I could find. Years ago, I found them in Blackpool, so I bought in Blackpool. Then it brought the Article 4 direction, stop investing there. And now I'm doing it here in northeast Lincolnshire because there's no Article 4 in place yet, but they're looking into trying to implement it as soon as they possibly can. We're talking about it in 2024, it's 2025. At the beginning of 2024, it's 2025, they still haven't implemented it yet, but before, the good thing is that before they say they're going to do it and they implement it, there's 1 year's time or grace period where you can actually still buy and immediately make the use of the house as an HMO and get all the certificates in place, so you can actually still use it after. So there's a little trick that we're going to be using later on, is a Class C building benefits from a permitted development right, which is called Part G, the permitted development right. If you read the legislation, it states that the use of that flat that you're going to create using the Part G, it can be up to 6 people as a single household. So it is my speculation at this point, and also giving care, where care is provided within this dwelling house. It is my contention at this point, I haven't tested it yet, because usually I do my testing, is that basically that definition is extremely close to an HMO. And I think if you apply for a license, for an HMO license, which you're going to get, it's not going to be a problem. Then as long as you get the right mechanisms, the right contracts in place, then there's going to be very little enforcement that the council can put on you on that particular case. So I think this is the case, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't done the due diligence on that yet. But basically, if there's an Article 480, you can still do that. What you can also do, you can buy and negotiate prices directly with the owners. It is important with the owners. And then you can negotiate an exchange subject to the owner providing the proof that the house has been used as an HMO since before the beginning of the Article 480. And that can be, especially with contracts, the tenancy agreements, usually 3 tenancy agreements, some sworn statements can actually also help. So in that way, you can safely acquire it, apply for lawful use certificate, and do it in a lawful way that way. I know about this trick because of Nottingham, because I've got a house in Nottingham, because I knew as soon as that Article 4 came in place, no way it was possible to get planning permission to get an HMO. It's very, very hard. It's really not worthwhile. It wasn't worthwhile in Nottingham. But I've seen houses that I knew were single dwelling house being converted into HMOs after the Article 480 without planning permission. And I was told this is what basically they were pulling at the time. At the time, they only needed a 4-year period for continuous use in Nottingham, because it was very well off the 2012 when I found this sort of scheme being pulled. So you can actually do the same thing. That can actually work. It's a bit riskier, but I personally would move into an area where there's no any Article 4, so you can just invest without any issue. So this is part of a book that we're making. I think it's going to be published in next month. And thank you very much for watching. Andreas Russo here. We hope that this video has been useful to you and will be useful at some point.